What are some common pitfalls that are interrupting that connection that they could be creating with their audience?
Probably the thing that sticks out the most to me that I see a lot of people doing is
The following is a conversation I recently had with Kimberly Alana Werkmeister. Kim is a vocalist and multi-instrumentalist based in Louisville, Kentucky. Kim's music has taken her from dueling pianos to private events, but the one thread that has remained consistent throughout her career and allowed her to thrive in a diverse range of musical environments is her ability to engage an audience. In this episode, we unpack Kim's methodology for how she engages an audience, including the most common mistakes she sees musicians make that's killing the vibe with their crowd, how to maximize audience engagement through proper preparation, and simple tools that any musician can use right now to learn to read a crowd. There's no question about it, musicians who know how to engage an audience are the most in-demand musicians in the market. So whether you're a seasoned professional looking to hone your skills in audience engagement, or you're new to the profession, this episode is going to make being a music pro a whole lot more fun and profitable for you. My name is Allison Legendre, and this is the Music Work Podcast. Please do enjoy. All right, I am here with Kim today. Kim is a stage presence expert. Kim, how are you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have this conversation because I need a lot of help in this domain in particular. And I know a lot of musicians are also in that boat. We practice our instrument a lot and we're technically like, oh, I can do this. And then we get out on the stage or we do a performance and it's a completely different environment. We freeze up, feel awkward, and it's just, it's not the best way to have that experience. And I know that you have a lot of insight and knowledge to share to help give some relief to all of us awkward musicians out there. So thank you for coming on the pod. Excited to dive in. Yeah, so let's get right to it. Talk to us about stage presence. Why do you feel like stage presence is important for musicians?
Well, we spend all this time practicing and we're so passionate about what it is that we do, what made us fall in love with music. But then when we get to a show and if we're not doing things to get people's attention, then we're like, well, then what was it for? You're just playing for yourself. Or it's just the same as having the speakers Spotify list. Now, me personally, I have had this perpetual need for attention. So if I'm doing something, I need people to pay attention to me. And it's what makes performing fun for me. It's not just the music. And I am also a believer that the music alone doesn't always draw people in. Sometimes it will. You will have the people who stop and they're like really appreciative of it. And they're like, I really enjoy your art. But some other people might need to get their attention a little bit more. But for me, stage presence has been about having fun and bringing others along for the ride. Because if I'm going on that ride by myself, it's not as fun for me. I want to take others with me.
I love that. And it's so true because, we are just like stuck in our practice room in this environment where we're all alone. And then going out into a performance, you want it to be fun. And I think stage performance is kind of the gateway to make it fun, knowing how to connect with people, not just through the music, but through the whole experience that you're giving them and what that looks like. So I think it's totally important. And it's also like an undeniable trend I see with professional performance musicians, those who have that performance flair, who, make people feel at ease. Those are the people who are doing the best, who, everyone wants to hire, who are in most demand. So it's such an important skill as a professional performance musician. It's not just about getting over stage fright. It's about how to actually, make your experience for guests and audience the best it can be. And, with that comes the benefits of being in more demand because it's such a lacking skill I see in the market. So I love those reasons. So let's talk about how to have more fun with stage performance then. When it comes to your journey, how did you stumble across this, hole in the market that you're like, okay, I love music, and stage performance is something that's not being taught. When did you first learn that like stage performance is something important, and how did you learn it? Did you learn it yourself, or did you teach yourself? A lot of questions there, but just take it any direction you want.
I feel like it started a long, long time ago, again, with my perpetual need for attention. Positive attention. We need to be clear on that. Positive attention. I think the first time I heard anybody talk about something that was stage presence related was in college in one of the master's classes. And after my performance, he was like, "You really know how to command the stage." And I didn't really know what he was talking about, to be perfectly honest. I was like, okay, whatever you say. But then I sing a lot in churches. And so in contemporary worship services, being expressive is a thing. And so we talk about it. We talk about drawing the audience in and how they're not going to go as far as, they're not going to go further than what they see people on stage doing. So I was kind of out of my element because I wanted to just be a singer. That's what I went in college was a singer. And they had me on keyboards for some reason. So like I would be scowling like, because I was so nervous. But anyway, I had to learn how to be more expressive, especially if I was behind the keyboard. But where it really got driven home for me was when I started working in dueling pianos. Because wow, you can't just get up there on stage and play. You will lose your audience and you will be playing to nobody. So you have to keep them in. You have to draw them in. They come there expecting it to be interactive. At least some people do who know how dueling pianos work. And so there's an aspect of it that, yes, musical, have that side down, but then how can you elevate that even more? Like, how can this really be entertaining? And nobody ever called it stage presence while I was there in my early years of it and training. Because there's a period of training when you're doing dueling pianos, and then even though you come out of training, you're still learning a lot. I'm still learning to this day, but that is when I began to notice, okay, when I do this happens. Or I'd have people come and tell me, "Why did you cue the audience that way? They're not going to follow you if you do it that way. Do it like this." Or some people in the old school dueling piano peoples can be really severe, let me tell you. so having that feedback is what sharpened me up. Like, okay, it inspired me to action. Then during one of my reviews, somebody told me, "You're very methodical to your approach when you're on stage." And I was like, methodical? I didn't know I was trying to burn the whole place down. Okay, let's explain, because in my mind that's what he meant. But he just meant like, no, you have a method. Like, you come into it, you do it this way, and it works. And so you just keep doing it that way. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess he has a point. I didn't have any words for it at the time. I didn't know how to explain what I was doing at that time. I just knew the corrections that I was getting from people of things to not do and to play around within the boundaries that they had set. That's kind of like the really long journey of, okay, this is a thing. Like, this is something that can be systematized and can be taught.
Okay. Wow. So you learned how to, came up with this method through your own experience, through getting feedback from others and being in these situations where it wasn't just a nice to have to be able to command an audience. It was a necessity. Like, it's like, yes, how they're like sink or swim type environments. So you kind of were forced to learn and had that feedback loop. That sounds like a great environment to learn. And now you're applying that. I'm curious how you see that skill now in your current life when you're doing, things that are in front of a audience on a stage. And then there's also like the private event space. Do you see it? Do any of those skills cross over there? What have you taken with you into like the private event world from that toolkit you have?
Absolutely. I think people see it as some fresh air because they hire me for their event. They want to take some, like they have a lot of hats that they're juggling, or what are hats, balls that they're juggling when they are doing these events. And so they want to know that their people are taken care of and that they had a good time. So I'm not anti iPads or sheet music by any stretch of the imagination. I need to make that very clear. Like I am not, especially mom brain, I forget words all the time. Forget words, forget chords, happens all the time. But I do recognize that if I'm looking down at my iPad, and whether I'm on guitar or I'm on the keyboard, that there might be people who stop and listen for a little bit. There may be some dancing going on, but when you have somebody who's attentive and who is like, oh, hey, I see that there's some people who are into this, and then can start interacting, that interaction draws other people in, and then other people are getting even more entertained, and then your host, whoever hired you, they're delighted. They're so delighted. And then it's led to repeat bookings for me, and then bigger bookings from there. So having that, knowing that that is a skill that I can systematize, or just tool sets, or having a set of tools that I can use and to know when to use them for different situations, keeps me getting hired for gigs. And people rave about it. Like I send out a survey after all of my private events, and that's one of the main things that they mention is how I got everybody involved, and they loved it.
I love that. And it's because it's solving like a problem or like a fear that people have, like, oh no, will people have fun at my event? Are people going to be bored? And if a musician is functioning, like you said, just as a Spotify playlist, well, that's not really going to solve the problem, because you can get Spotify playlists anywhere. It's marginally better. But having a musician who knows how to engage people and, you know, create an experience for people, well, that just like is a sigh of relief for everyone who's like, you know, hoping that everything goes well and crossing their fingers that everyone has a good time. You can actually like, hey, don't worry about it. I got it. People are having a good time. So yeah, that's awesome that you're able to cross those worlds over and provide that service. And yeah, it is something that most musicians don't feel comfortable exploring a lot of times, I see. So let's talk about maybe some tools that we can help musicians with. But before we go there, let's start with like just some common mistakes that we see musicians make when it comes to stage presence. Like what are some common pitfalls that you know, happen that maybe musicians aren't even aware of, that are, you know, interrupting that connection that they could be creating with their audience?
One thing, probably the thing that sticks out the most to me that I see a lot of people doing, is they'll try something, they'll try some interaction. Maybe they're shy about it, or maybe they weren't quite sure what to say. That could be it. Or maybe they said it and they set it up in a weird way, and so people weren't really sure how to respond. But when they show that frustration, like that is probably the biggest thing, where I'm like, oh, no, please don't do that. Because especially if I'm on stage, then it just looks like you're angry or like you're insulting the crowd. Like, please don't insult your audience. Please don't do that. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, killing the vibe with song selection. Like playing those B-sides. I mean, it can be cool, like, but if you have the crowd up and going and they're dancing, and then you're like, I'm going to completely, without giving any warning, I'm going to just play something of a completely different genre or a completely different pace. And you can kill your dance floor if you have a dance floor going. Sometimes you just kill the vibe. Like, it's just like, it's not like an insult from the crowd. It's just kind of like oh, well, I was jamming and now it's just kind of mellow. So they may go back and to something else they're doing. Or it could be the opposite. Things were mellow, but now things are getting a little too hype, and I'm not really here for that. I'm trying to go home and sleep later. You know, it can be the opposite. Whatever the vibe was, killing it or changing it. Changing it when it needed not be changed, or they weren't ready for it to be. This is a dueling piano specific thing, or maybe those who are keyboardists specific thing, but just not using enough bass or left hand. Sometimes we just need that to fill out the sound. Sometimes we tend to stay like in those like one register or just like a really small register. But this filling it all out, like I said, that's a really piano specific thing for anybody who happens to be a singing pianist. So,
Yeah, no, that totally applies, the adding the bass, because I mean, even just when it comes like to my world, it's hard because we have sheet music that we prepared beforehand. We have like, our set list, we already prepared, and it's just like sit and read the music. And so, us classical musicians are so conditioned to just like follow follow the plan. And what I'm getting from you is it's not so much about following the plan. Yes, know what you're doing, but be able to read a room and be able to
yes.
adjust, change plans, and make decisions on the fly. And how do you develop that skill of being able to make those calls? Like, okay, time to change the song. Like, okay, we need to keep the vibe here. Like, is that a practice thing? Is that a feeling thing? How do you develop that?
Ooh, I think you develop it by having an eye. You have to do a lot of gigs, and I hate to say it, but you have to fail a lot at it. You have to bomb a few times to see, like, okay, well, that did not work. And I know that can be a lot of people, especially if you're playing more high-end clients, like, I don't want to show up to a gig and just bomb. But it might mean practicing in other less pressure environments. Or I'm fortunate in that, I get to do it every night or almost every night or many times a week. So I have lots of chances to test it out there. But before I had that opportunity, I was hitting those open mics quite a bit. So reading the room, there are things that I look for. Of course, I'm looking for the people who are moving, the people who do seem interested. You're going to have your loud people who are really expressive, and you're going to have sometimes your quiet people who aren't as expressive. I'm looking at age, kind of guessing what age they might be. I make sure this is probably before anything else, I make sure I get as much information from the event coordinator as possible. Like, if it's a private event, private corporate event, where are your guests coming from before they get to the event? What are they getting ready to go do? Because that's going to affect how they're going to respond to the music. Like, let's see, a couple months ago, I did one. It was in the middle of a park. It was so cool. It was like the fanciest park in this town at one time. At one time, probably in the 70s. But now it's still a nice park, and it's attached to some hotels. But the guests were coming off of like a boat ride or something like that, or a day of conferences. But they had another event to go to after. So the main point of them being there was they were hungry. They needed to eat. So yes, they were responding, but the expectation of having a dance floor, that's just not there. And it's just probably not going to happen because they're trying to stuff their face as quickly as possible to get to whatever the next event is. So sometimes you can read faces wrong. I'm not sure the other people there were. I asked, so I'm not sure that the other people there knew what was happening. That could easily be misinterpreted. Like if you're a person who really tries to read faces, and I am, if you don't have that information beforehand, that might throw off your whole game. Like, it might throw off your whole performance. Like, well, they're not responding. It's not that. It's just that they're trying to eat their taco salad. That's all. They really liked it. It's just they need to eat their taco salad and leave.
The example really hit it home because it's like you could have that expectation, and if it's wrong, like, all disappointments are just unmet expectations. So knowing what other people's expectations are, and then you can, manage them for yourself. So you don't feel you're doing a bad job. Like, oh, I thought this was gonna, people are gonna vibe with me, but okay, that's not the right time for this. And so understanding the details, I think that is a great tip for other musicians out there who are, trying to understand how they can also get better at reading the room, understand the context of the room before you try to read the room. So that's a great piece of advice there. But yeah, when it comes to just the reading the room things, like, how do you know how to engage with an audience? Like, what are some tools that you have in your tool belt? Are we talking about movement? Are we talking about speech? Are we talking about, musicality? And again, for context, when you're performing, you're usually singing in keys, if I have that right.
Usually singing and piano, typically.
Okay. Okay.
Now with that, I also, for my own private gigs, I have a loop pedal, and as I've explained this to you in private,
Right.
not being recorded, that I describe myself as, it's like Ed Sheeran, but if he had a keyboard and an Afro poof.
Right.
like that's what I do.
Right.
And so for me, first of all, like all those things that you mentioned, all of them are very important in terms of reading a room or knowing which direction to go, especially if you weren't able to get that information beforehand. But I always want to start out with a strong handshake, something that a song I do really well. I know sometimes like we might be so excited, like we're practicing one song, but it's brand new. We haven't done it in front of a crowd. Probably not the right time to do it. Probably not, at least not for me personally. I start out with one of what I know is one of my strongest songs. In that, I have questions built in, me personally. And so I'm like, okay, who's excited to be drinking on a Tuesday night? If they go, they might not be the people who are going to be there all night long. But if they're like, woo, then okay, we know we got somebody who's a little more energetic and ready to go. Now, it may also be that they're just kind of, the woo may have been because they're still trying to figure out what the heck is going on. They like you, but they're just like, well, I don't know what's happening. So I'll do that a few times in that first song by asking those questions first, and also to let them know that, hey, I like talking and interacting with people. And or just cues for them to clap or to sing, seeing how they respond to those. Going from that response, I can make a call about, okay, well, do I want to try different songs? Because I do believe that your song selection is going to be key. But if you don't, especially in a private event space, if you don't have a way of getting that feedback for what kind of songs they like to hear, that's going to be really difficult. So sometimes that does mean trying out a few different songs, or I am fortunate because I have a mic and I can just ask them. I can do a poll like, hey, I've been playing these kind of songs. Do you all like this? Or do you prefer this? Make some noise for this. Okay, make some noise for that. Oh, well, okay, well then let's do that.
Awesome. So what I'm picking up when it comes to reading the room, the song list, like your set list, is important, and catering that to the audience and the guests is important. And that's like it seems like you approach it as like your job. Okay, I got to figure out what these people want, what they're in the mood for right now. I'm reading the room to see their style, what, kind of maybe age they are, what they might like. I'm getting responses from them to see what they might like, seeing how excited they are for different types of genres or whatever, and then just like playing off of it from there. So a lot of the interaction, I think that can give some people some reassurance because, you can have those easy like opener questions like you mentioned as well, but like to give a direction to engaging with audiences of like, hey, it's about making your music, the set list, really solid for them or something that they're going to really appreciate. I think that will be a good kind of like anchor spot for people to think about, like how to approach and connecting with an audience. It's about making sure they're getting the music they are here for. So I love that. Those are some great tips on reading the room. When it comes to maybe the things that we can't just learn on the job through practice, like the reading the room stuff, we're going to be practicing when we're there. We're going to have a few tips with us. Do you have any tips for like the at-home environment? Because again, for a lot of musicians, we're at home practicing so much of the time, and then we go into the live environment and it's so different. Any tips or anything that you have to help musicians who are wanting to work on their stage presence when it comes to their at-home environment and preparation beforehand?
If you are somebody who is singing and accompanying yourself, something I think is really important is to make sure you know how to vamp. Know how to extend the song if you need to extend parts of a song. I didn't realize until having a conversation with some newer players that was actually a thing. Like, okay, like, I don't know how to fit what I'm saying in here. I'm like, well, just play another pass of it. Like, just play another pass of it and then practice getting back into it. For those of us who maybe were just instrumentalists, y'all,
We know what you mean.
instrumentalists do the real hard work, okay? I cannot encourage enough using a camera and recording yourself, because number one, just like you saw at the beginning of this recording, there's something about hit and record that's like, oh. And you start working out kinks really fast in songs. So by the time you actually get to the gig, you don't have to worry about those kinks as much. Then you also get to see yourself. And just in seeing yourself, you're like, I look like that. And like, even me to this day, there are things that I do. I'm like, oh Lord, wow, I didn't know I looked like that. Okay, well, I'll go fix that a little bit later. And you can also see if they're from seeing, okay, this is how I look, seeing if that's something you want to make more expressive, if there are parts of the song that you really want to emphasize for people, or if you're playing in a group and you want them to see, like, this is the person who has the melody line. Like, are you doing little things like making sure you're turning your body that way, when it is maybe you're taking the melody and it's your time to shine? Do you have it memorized? Like, can you really sell it for people? I mean, if you need to look at your sheet music, then look at your sheet music. But if you can memorize it,
right,
like, that would be great.
I love that you said that, because I kind of stumbled on that recently, actually. I'm like playing and recording myself more, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I look like that, or I sound like that. And it's like, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's like a tip that Kim was going to think of, because it really puts that pressure on that is also similar to being on stage. So you see, like, what do you actually do when it's, you're under pressure and need to perform.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to kind of ease your way into it and get that feedback. So I love that. That's a great tip.
I actually have a rule of 3 for myself personally for live performances, not just the camera. If it's a camera, it's probably going to take me like 25 takes. Let's be real. Like, I was recording something last night. It wasn't even music stuff. It took me about 25 takes.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
But when I get on stage, no matter how perfect I have it in practice, this is why, again, I'm so fortunate that I have the opportunity to do this. I have a job that affords me to do this. I have to do it like the first time I'm going to perform it, something's going to go wrong. It's just an abysmal fail. Just terrible. Like, oh wow, I can't believe that happened. Then I can work through whatever that kink was, but now something else has gone wrong. Some little trip up in the middle of the song that I was like, oh, didn't expect myself to do that. Then by the third time, it's usually almost there. There might be one more little hiccup. Typically by the 4th time, we're good. Typically. Right. Sometimes it takes a little longer, and then sometimes it might be less. Like, I introduced a song last night and I was actually really surprised. It's like, that just like oozed out of me naturally. I wasn't expecting that. And it was the first pass. So who knows what's going to happen on the second and third. I might jinx myself.
But yeah. Okay. So what I'm getting is, like, give yourself a little bit of permission when you're doing something for the first time. Things you can't ever completely replicate what it's going to be like, the experience of being at a performance. So you kind of count on, like, giving yourself a little bit of grace when you're doing something for the first time. And I think that's a super important key, because I wanted to, like, wrap up by sharing this one quote that I just came up with that I want to get your opinion on.
Okay.
And it is, it's better to not hold back musically and make a mistake in a performance than to hold back musically, or than holding back musically and getting every note perfect.
Oh yeah.
Did I say that right? I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Better to not hold back musically and make a mistake in a performance.
Yeah. I think of, I 100% agree with that. We actually have some fiddle players in the dueling bar. So the times people get shy, and the times people get shy and they're like worried about hitting every single note, there is that stiffness, and it's not as, people still get really excited, but those who are just really like lean into it, they're just like, ooh, this is my time to shine. I might get this completely wrong, but here we go. We're going to go for it. They get an even bigger response than what those who are kind of just a little more sheepish about potentially messing up. But I also get it from that classical training and all the recitals and the formality of classical. I get that. Like, I understand that that's where it may be coming from. But if you can break those rules, break free from it, especially for if it's like contemporary music, then please do. People eat it up. They love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like every time I just remember being in university and like whenever we're giving ourselves critiques or performance, it's just like, man, I always just want people to like just push forward and just like make a mistake, just like commit. It's like always just so much more satisfying because like a mistake passes momentarily. And like I'm full of them. I do them all the time. So I tell myself it's like, it's fine, it passed, but at least you committed. So I don't know. For me, that's it as like an audience participant. It's much better experience to like be able to engage with someone who's like fully committed rather than like staying too much on the safe side. So I'm glad you concur with that because I think that's where it all stems from, like just feeling the music. So
yeah,
awesome. This has been like super fun. I learned a lot. I'm going to practice. I think this is something that a lot of musicians should think about because again, and practice, because like we said at the top of the episode, this is the thing that really makes musicians stand out. It may seem like the small thing, but it's a big thing. And you're going to be in high demand if you're a musician who really knows how to keep people engaged in what you do and has some tools in your tool belt to be able to, feel out the room and bring in an audience and have a good time and make sure everyone's having a good time with you. So this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for coming on, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me.